So apparently, according to one analyst, or maybe a few, the PlayStation 5 may be coming out sooner than expected. And according to them, the reasons for this are because the PlayStation 4 sales are beginning to slow down. So let's read this quote here. It says, "There are even more drawbacks as we expect the slowdown in growth in the games division," talking about Sony's game division, "will be very likely a PS5 launch for the coming fiscal year, and the associated cost of launching a new platform. It's definitely not as positive as the headlines suggest. It feels a bit negative overall. Strong gains from the game software were offset by higher advertising and marketing costs aimed at increasing PS4 volume. We're on the fringes until we better assess the gambling risks." So obviously, what we're seeing here is investors kind of starting to back off a little bit because the PlayStation 4 is coming to the end of its life cycle, and it's kind of crazy to think that you see the insane success that Sony's been having with their games and the sales of the PlayStation 4, and yet we see analysts kind of being more hesitant now. And it's because going into next generation, a lot of us want to assume we know exactly how it's going to play out. You know, Sony's just going to continue domination, Microsoft's going to continue to do terrible, and that's just the way it's going to be. But it probably is not going to be that simple. Even Sony, and I think it's important for people to understand this, even Sony was very surprised by just how well the PS4 did. But they were very business savvy. They were smart to capitalize on many of Microsoft's mistakes this generation, and I highly doubt that going into next generation, Sony's going to be trying to plan to capitalize on Microsoft's mistakes. That would just be a dumb thing to do. You don't base your success off of, another company potentially making a mistake or failing. And I think that Sony's probably a lot smarter than that and understands that Microsoft's going to be going in a lot harder and being a lot smarter about it come next generation. But does this actually mean that the PS5 could be coming out sooner because investors are being a little bit more on the fence now and they're waiting and seeing, and so this is going to pressure Sony to get the PS5 out the door sooner? Well, you know what? To be honest, we did hear a rumor. I don't remember exactly when or where the rumor came from, so do not take it as gospel. I just remember reading about it or hearing about it where there was some rumor floating around that Sony was considering trying to prep the PS5 to launch in like March of 2020 and not holiday of 2020, because 99% of gamers and even people outside of the games industry to an extent are pretty much expecting the next generation of consoles to release holiday of 2020. That's when we're all expecting it. And the idea that Sony may come out here with a PS5 in March of 2020, that would be kind of crazy. And I think it would be safe to say that if they were going to do that, if that was even a possibility for them, that it would really probably catch Microsoft severely off guard. And I think that would be a positive thing for Sony, because this is where Sony, they're being very quiet. They're being a lot quieter than Microsoft is, and we know that the entire focus for Sony and their games division is shifting over to next generation. I have another report here, and that's exactly what it says. It says Sony is now focusing on PS5 games. No news this year. This also comes from an analyst, and it says that while less than a fifth of all game developers have moved on to making games for the PS5 yet, according to a GDC survey, it seems like Sony's own internal studios, at the very least, are going all in on focusing on the company's upcoming next-generation consoles. Speaking on Reset Era, Daniel Ahmad, an analyst with Nico Partners, mentioned that Sony's internal teams have already begun to development kits, or to get development kits for the PS5. That said, he also noted that for now, fans should expect no news on the upcoming console, while mentioning that this year should go fine for PS4, largely on the back of third-party games and previously announced exclusives. So the quote says, PS5 dev kits are out, and I've heard positive things about it, but I wouldn't expect any information in the immediate future. 2019 will be another solid year for the platform due to the large install base, growing network sales, strong third-party software, first-party software, and back catalog. He said in another post that lineup for the first half of the year is set, but second half is still in flux. Sony also has a couple of unannounced games, already existing IP, with PS4 in mind, but I'm cautious that there have been discussions around making them cross-gen / next-gen titles. In general, most of the focus for Sony's first party is on the PS5 right now. It is still early to talk about the next-gen, but I imagine we'll hear some whispers come out of GDC. So some very interesting information there, for sure. I think that one of the most important things to gather from that is that, Sony really is, and I think this is kind of obvious, but we're really seeing it be reaffirmed here, that they are just they're pretty much done with the PS4, and they're riding the success wave to the end. So it's kind of strange to see the people who are investing kind of being a little bit more cautious and nervous. I don't think they have any reason to be. I think Sony's going to do not only just fine for the remainder of the year, but I mean, it says here, or if Daniel Ahmad is to be believed, you think about games like The Last of Us Part 2, Death Stranding, and Ghost of Tsushima, and apparently there's also other games that haven't been announced yet, which is really interesting because I remember making a video a while back that there was a rumor floating around that Microsoft or Sony had another big AAA title that they didn't announce yet that they were potentially planning on announcing, and a lot of people were speculating it may be Bloodborne 2. I really don't know. It could be anything. I think it said that it was an existing IP. So there's definitely some stuff that Sony has that they can announce, and they can't decide, do they want to make it this generation? Do they want to try to get it out the door before this generation is over? Do they want to make it cross-gen? They could just be talking about games like Death Stranding and stuff, and even The Last of Us Part 2. It's really hard to say how they're going to do it, but I just think it's interesting. It's hard to say if Sony's going to really try to pull something crazy, and maybe at PSX 2019, that's when they officially reveal the PS5, and then we find out they're going to pull something crazy and actually launch the PS5 in March of 2020, and that some games we were expecting, maybe The Last of Us 2 doesn't come out by the end of this year, but instead it's going to have a kind of spring-summer launch, which I think could be expected. That's kind of around the time frame the first game released. Maybe they'll have a spring-summer launch alongside the PS5 with The Last of Us Part 2. I think that would be huge. I think Sony's kind of aware that if there's any game they could launch alongside the PS5, it would be that. Obviously, it would still come out for the PS4. But I think that, if a game like The Last of Us 2, keep in mind, I'm just speculating here, I'm just spitballing. If a game like The Last of Us Part 2 were to actually release alongside the PS5 and be a cross-generation game, it would still be huge for the PS5. But the same thing could happen to any one of Sony's other games that they have that we don't have release dates for, such as Death Stranding. That's going to be huge. Ghost of Tsushima, seems like a lot of people are excited for that. Because right now, we only know about Days Gone, and we know about Dreams. But, as it said in this post from Daniel Ahmad, the release dates for some of these games are kind of in flux. It's up in the air. So, overall, it seems like things are winding down for Sony, and they are really going to be, and they already are, really just focusing on the next generation, the PlayStation 5, and making sure that they can have everything prepared for that, because, I talk about Microsoft a lot on my channel, and I talk about their plans, and one thing I've gathered from Microsoft versus Sony, when it comes to next generation, is that it's going to be different. I do think that Sony will still obviously have a lot of momentum going into next generation, but Microsoft has kind of proven that they are not backing down, and they are really going to kind of, come at Sony a lot harder in the more traditional way than they have. And I know I've been kind of talking recently about how Microsoft with their Project X Cloud and Game Pass, and they're getting away from console. Well, you need to understand that I may have fears for the deep future, but that doesn't just go for Microsoft. That goes for all of these companies. I like consoles. I don't want to see them go away. I don't think they're going away anytime soon. I do think that next generation Microsoft is going to be doubling down on hardware and software when it comes to games, and I think Sony is aware of that, and I think they're going to be prepared for that. It's just going to be a matter of how will the market respond. And to end this video, I will say that we know Sony's going to have a lot of amazing games because we know we're going to get follow-ups to God of War, Spider-Man, Horizon Zero Dawn. We still have The Last of Us Part 2, Death Stranding, Ghost of Tsushima, and apparently some other unannounced titles. So we know that Sony is continuing on this path of success that they've been on by just doubling down on what has worked and apparently what gamers want. So it's just a matter of, will Microsoft be able to compete in that department? Because this generation, they haven't been able to. And they still won't be able to until this generation's over. You know that everything Microsoft is doing is in preparation for the next generation. So we're going to have to see how it all ends up playing out for both of these companies. But that's going to do it for the video, guys. I thought maybe you'd find this interesting. I know I did. So I guess I'll end it by asking you, how do you think the next generation is going to play out? Do you think it's just going to play out the way we're all expecting, where both the PlayStation 5 and the next Xbox launch in holiday of 2020, and they're both announced at some point in 2020? Or do you think that we're going to see maybe Sony pull a fast one and announce the PS5 at PSX 2019 and potentially release it sometime in early/mid 2020? Or do you think that there's just no way that could happen? Or do you think that maybe Microsoft could end up being the one pulling a fast one? I will be interested to see what you guys have to say, so be sure to leave your thoughts down below. Leave the video a like if you did enjoy it. It really helps out, lets me know you guys are enjoying the content. I appreciate all of the recent support you guys have been showing me on my channel. It does not go unnoticed. Also, subscribe if you're new. Hit the bell notification icon and feel free to share the video out as well, because that also helps tremendously. But until next time, guys, take care.